in downward facing dog or child's pose or puppy dog pose. To start to do a little movement just so that you bring your awareness to the sides of the body. So if you're in child's pose, you can walk your hands over to one side and stay there for a breath or two. If you're in downward facing dog, just move your pelvis to one side and to the other, but very slowly. As we work these different areas around the SI joint, we'll also try to kind of lubricate and get a little bit more fluidity to the connective tissue. And so as you move here in this pose, whatever pose you chose, allow your breath to help you in those movements. You don't want to move too much, just very slowly. Just kind of tuning in to your body today. Allowing your breath to help you start to focus on how one side is slightly different than the other side, how one side is full and bright, and the other side maybe not quite so much. So, bringing your attention to just kind of come back to a more balanced action side to side. And now let's all make our way to the very top of the mat. And once at the top of the mat, come to a standing pose, Tadasana. I'm going to today be using two blocks and a strap. And I've also got a tennis ball here. Tennis balls are really helpful, but if you have a strap, roll your strap up so it can have the same effect as the tennis ball here as we work. So as you come to standing, stand on two blocks to begin with. And I have big feet, and so I like having two blocks in this long way so that I know that my feet have plenty of space to move. And as you stand on the blocks, you can stand on the blocks with your left foot and allow your right foot to be the side that's kind of hanging down. Now, as you stand on the left foot, you can stand on the tiptoes of the right foot, but rather than letting the right hip fall, see if you can find what is level for you. As you draw your awareness to getting these hips level, see about just lifting up the right foot and tapping it down, all while trying to keep the hip level. Just keep a nice awareness. You'll notice that the standing leg gets a little bit pooped after a while. So you can bend slightly the standing leg as you start to bring your awareness to the glutes of the standing leg. You see how they're really working to keep that stability. You can release after this round, come off the block and just kind of check in for a moment here with parallel hip points. And just to check that out with the feet parallel and in Tadasana. And step to your blocks again. And if you're finding that there's a balance issue here, just have a chair nearby or a wall or something. As you step your right foot to the blocks, just park them nicely here. And same thing, the one side of the hip could be up or down. This is a really good thing to, of course, do in front of a mirror. And it's also a good practice to do repeatedly because you'll notice how one side is much different than the other. And we'll have an opportunity to go back to that side that was a little bit more problematic. We'll do this another time after this, just so that you can kind of check in to that side that could use a little bit more work. So I'm starting to move my left foot up and down, just getting a nice rooted quality in my right foot as I'm lifting up and down on the opposite, trying to keep the hip points level, keeping a nice steadiness in the standing leg, keeping a nice spread to the toes of the standing leg. So I've got a strong foundation. And from the strong foundation, I'm really drawing up to get that engagement of the glutes and the other muscles in the hip area. Release down and pause again. And as you pause, like what side to you felt like it was challenging for one reason or another, through balance, or you didn't feel as much engagement or whatever. Just pick one side, and that's the advantage of the online action, I think, is that it just the online classes, because you can really customize the practice to make it work for you in some way. So come to that side that you felt like, oh, I'd like to just kind of explore that a little bit more. And you'll start with your hips out of balance. So see what you can do to get the hips in balance before lifting up the leg and just drawing it in nicely. Same thing, you can tap down or not, but you just try to keep the hip points parallel as you keep the toes spreading, as you keep the standing leg engaged. And it is challenging to start your practice in balance, but mostly we're trying to get these hip flexors to get more alert here. So come out of the pose and come to lie down on your back for just a moment here. And as you lie down on your back, have your knees bent and your feet planted. And just pause here. Just kind of notice now that the hips have got full support of the earth, take the hands right at the hip points and see if you can and tell maybe one hip point is a little higher than the other. You just allow yourself to just kind of settle in here on the floor and pause. We'll be working the outer hip in just a moment. And I'd like to use that rolled strap. So if you could have that by you. Have your hands right at the hip points and lift your hip points up into the palms of the hand and just move the waistline back. Do that a few more times. Lift your belly up. And as you do, you just kind of notice that the hip points drop away from the palm of the hands. Do the opposite, and you'll find the hip points lift up. So you just come back to what feels to you like the neutral position and roll over to your right side. So as you roll over to your right side, grab um, the rolled belt and have the rolled belt right under the hip point, but more on the glutes, on the upper glute. So, and you're going to lie on this on your side. And it's not going to feel so great, but it's going to take just a moment to just kind of ease into it. So, as you kind of rest yourself on the roll, and again, if you've got a ball, that's nice too. But this will work fine. So I've got the bottom leg straight, and the other leg I'm just using it as support here. And you can take that the foot in front of you or behind you. And as you lie on your side, so you're stretching through the side body, and that myofascial release that we're going through, which is the rolled belt, is on some part of the hip. And if it doesn't feel so comfortable, then move, go to another area. But this just allows that area that supports the hip flexion so much by just taking your attention and a little pressure to one area. And if you can handle it, lift your right leg up or whatever is your straight bottom leg and lift it up and tap it down. And you'll start to notice how that muscle that you're actually putting a little pressure on, you're just kind of feeling it being massaged a little bit more as you lift up the bottom leg and tap it down and up and down and up and down and up and down, and one more, up and down. All right, let's come to the opposite side. And in the same way, as you take your strap, it's right below the hip point, but more on the glute side, right? So you're just and find a way to, find a point, and then maybe that's not such a great point for you, so you find another point. Feel free to, but once you find a point to work on, stay there. And why we're doing this is so that the glutes that we're working on now really help. It's one of the great pelvic stabilizers. And you need the glutes to become very involved in balance, of course. So inhale, lift the leg if you wish. If this is plenty pressure for you, just keep it passive. But if you can, lift the straight leg up, and from the inner groin, you're pulling to lift up, and just do that a few more cycles. And it is amazing how the effect of these relatively passive stretches here, where we just pinpoint specific muscles, the effect that this can have on our balance, the stability it gives the pelvic area, and release out of that side. Come to all fours position. And now let's notice the difference in our lunge. I like using blocks when I come to this lunge. We'll start with a low lunge, and we'll start with the left foot forward. So as you take your left foot right between the blocks, just settle yourself in to come to the low lunge. So the left heel is pressing down and pulling in toward the pelvis. The right toes are pressing down and they're pulling in toward the pelvis. So the left leg, you should feel the back of the thigh here on the front leg. You'll feel those hamstrings plug in. And the back leg, it's a two for one sort of pose here. The back leg, you're starting to feel the quads really turn on. So see if you can take your fingertip tops to the block. You're still doing that strong, powerful pulling in of the front foot to the back foot. And inhale, reach your arms up and take the hands nice and wide apart. Keep a strong action of the legs as you just open up and reach your hands back. Exhale, release your hands to the blocks and tuck your back toes under to lift your back knee up. So we'll come slowly to a crescent lunge and come to that fingertip top position right on the tall blocks. Lift up slightly and tap the blocks again. Lift up slightly and tap the blocks. And three more. Lift up and tap and lift up and tap and lift up and tap and reach your arms up. to come to this high lunge. Release your hands down and step back to either downward facing dog or child's pose, where you just pause here and you notice the difference, one side compared to the other. Take your breath to just enliven that area that we worked on. To keep we call it the prana, this life force energy, really flowing in that area that we worked on. Two more breaths here in downward facing dog or child's pose or the pose of your choice. Come down to all fours position again. Take your right foot forward, your left knee back, have your blocks, and as you step the foot forward, just settle in. And for some of us, I failed to mention it the last side, but if your knee doesn't like this so much, then by all means grab it and grab some padding for your knee so you can settle in a little bit more. And once you do, your front heel has a lot to do with charging up your hamstrings here. Get your leg muscles to work. And that's one of the things in these SI joint issues that we have. We're just not working our legs in a way that really facilitates just a little bit more hip flexion. So press down through the right heel and then pull in from the right heel. With the left toenails down, push down, and now hug in toward the pelvis again. Come to your fingertip top position here. If your blocks are too tall, then lower them down or just get rid of them so that you can rise up and down, just kind of lifting up and down, tapping the blocks as you stay in the pose to go a little bit deeper. And then use the help of your blocks to lift yourself up, tuck your back toes under, lift your back knee up. And in this higher lunge, see about this once again, coming off the block and tapping down, coming off the block and tapping down. And again, this just allows this tissue, this connective tissue, to just get just a little bit more fluid. Think of the connective tissue as kind of like a wetsuit, right? It just kind of covers the whole body, covers all the muscles. And as you're ready, lift your arms up to come to a high lunge with your hands nice and wide apart, with your heart open. It's a balance on 2 feet. Just to spread your wings a little bit more as you keep your hips very stable, very open. And release your hands. Step your back foot forward. Place both hands to the low back and lift yourself up again. And grab your two blocks so that we can use them to once again try another standing pose here. So as you do, and set them up in a way that will support you nicely. Step your left foot on the block and same thing, just to allow your toes to tap if that makes you feel more stable. And find out how you can feel like the hip points are parallel. As you release your leg down, just take your arms up over your head and stretch the side body a lot. As you're reaching the right foot down, you are reaching over to the left side. And it's hard to balance there. You can tap your toes as you wish and release your hands. And one more thing, bend your standing leg just slightly and swing your leg back. Keep your standing leg bent, lift your leg up and swing back. And I know the standing leg starts to get really tired, but you're engaging the muscles nicely to support the pelvis and reach back and tap the foot down and step to the opposite side. So adjust your blocks so that you can get your right foot firmly planted. And with the right foot planted, just see about getting the pelvis as level as possible. And of course, it will come out of level when we're doing this, but see if you can just keep that mindful awareness as you reach your arms up and over your head. Just keep a nice engagement on the standing leg and slowly release. Even though this is pretty static practice, I find myself getting like really warm trying to balance. Inhale, lift your leg up and reach it back as the standing leg stays slightly bent. And inhale, notice what side feels a little bit more challenging to you? And that's the side that you can come back and do this practice. It's just so beneficial for the SI joint, for balance. One more time. Lift up and reach back. Ha. Release your foot down. Come to Tadasana and just take your blocks so that they're out of your way and to your side there. Pause here for a moment. Breathe in deep and breathe out long. Feel a rooted quality from the pelvis down to your feet. Feel a lengthening quality from the pelvis all the way up to the crown of your head. And now, with your eyes bright, place your hands at your hips and step wide on your mat. And as you step wide on your mat, we'll continue this work on the connective tissue that allows us to just get a little bit more length. So these muscles that connect to the pelvic area, like the QLs, maybe you've heard that, the quadratus lumborum, these side muscles, sometimes one gets tighter than the other, and it really affects how the hip works. And in triangle pose, as you take your right toes out, sometimes one hip like really wants to lift up, and it will because, of course, that's the form of the pose. But rather than jamming one hip back and lifting the other one up, see if you can come just easily over and reach your hand down. And so this is a much milder triangle pose than you're used to, but we're just attuning again to the pelvic area and doing some pulses. That lengthens this QL muscle, this quadratus lumborum. You just kind of bob down, just let your hand just stroke the shin bone or whatever, just bob a little bit. You don't want to go too far doing this action. And inhale, come to triangle. Exhale, reach over and stay where you are. Keep the breath expanding through the side body. And inhale, rise up. One of the dangers of this is that we go a little bit too far. So in this practice, you don't want to do that. You just want to kind of get this connective tissue, much more fluid. So come to with the opposite side with the left toes turned out and just draw over again without lifting the hip too much. See if you can just kind of come to maybe what you'd consider your partial triangle pose here. Just take your lifted arm to the waist and pause. Let the left arm that's just hanging toward the floor be this thing that just kind of allows you to kind of just tap down. The weight of the arm helps you. You're starting to lengthen this side. Now, how is this side compared to the opposite side? And this is what yoga is so great at, right? We can start to define what areas it is really time for us to give a little bit more attention to. So as you remember some of these poses, then practice these things several times to just get that balance more to a state of equipoise, as we call it. Take your right arm up, take your right arm over your head, and pause there in this variation of triangle pose. Have the side body really long as you lengthen from the pelvis out through the fingertips and root down to rise up. Exhale and release your hands. Step to Tadasana. And again, check it out. So we've done a lot of balance poses. We've done all this work to get these hip flexors that stabilizes our pelvic area for greater balance, to be in balance more. So one hip might be slightly higher than the other during the day, and you just try to have a remembrance of that action. Bring your breath to the side that feels a little bit more contracted than the other. And lying on our back again, we'll have another opportunity to work the hip flexor, this time the iliopsoas. So as you lie on your back, you'll need one block, and it's really up to you. But um, I like the middle height, but this can be pretty intense and for a lot of people. So let's all start on the low height of the block with our pelvis supported by the low height. So as you lie down, find your way to the mat. Lift your pelvis up with your knees bent, and it's not your low back again on the block. It's the sacrum, that area that we've been working. So your glutes are supported. You want your low back to be very free here. So just pause here for a moment, and sometime with the leveling of the block with your hands right at your hip points, maybe you can kind of calibrate for yourself, like which hip point feels a little higher than the other. And it's very subtle for most of us. And just see if you can come to a balanced action. And usually just by activating the legs more, you can find that balance. And activating the legs means pushing your heels down first, pulling the heels in toward the pelvis second. So the hamstrings are quite active in this. So keeping the leg active, especially on the left side, take the right foot up off the mat and just pull the right knee in. So as you pull the right knee in a little bit more, see about reaching your left leg out. And just do a little pulsing here. Let's start actually with left leg straight up, all right? And see how that is for you. So as you pull the right knee in, you just let the left leg float down maybe 20, 30 degrees or so. Just kind of check it out there. And now let it float down a little bit more. Now both legs are active, and you know what that means. That means the toes are spread. You're drawing in from the toes to the heel to the pelvis. Everything is active. Maybe you can draw your heel a little bit closer to the mat, but at some point you'll feel like a quite a tugging, and when you come to that feeling like, oh, that's a lot of tugging, then that's your indication that you've gone way too far. So inhale and lift your legs straight up. And let's start that one more time. Exhale, come down about 20 degrees. Keep the leg active. Draw your foot down a little bit more. Really working this. It looks so passive, but if you're really working the legs, you're starting to feel those areas around the hip flexors and just draw the foot just a little bit closer to the mat this time. And inhale, lift your leg up. Exhale, bend both knees to plant your feet on the floor and take your block out from underneath your pelvis to straighten your legs and pause there. And just see, what difference do you feel? Just as you allow yourself to kind of dive in and get to know what's going on with your body. It's like a new adventure every time you practice. You start to notice these nuances, and the hip has so many, the pelvis has just so many muscles that support it to stabilize it. When you become aware of how to engage these different muscles, it allows a whole new sense of freedom. So hopefully you're feeling the contrast between the two sides. Bend both knees, and let's see if we can get a little bit more balance here. So lift your pelvis up. Now, if your pelvis is not so happy lifted up, then forget it. Don't even lift it up. Just keep it on the floor. But for most of us, just a little elevation, like if the block is too high, you can use a rolled towel or something like that. First, draw your left leg in. And right from the get-go, usually people can tell, oh, this side is so different than the other side. And that's the great thing about yoga. It really teaches us so much. So you could start with a straight leg, straight parallel to the floor, but let's instead take the foot straight up toward the sky so that it's just a little bit more accessible to us. Now, sometimes we feel like the block is not at the right place, and by all means, shift that around so you feel that stability before we start going through these repetitions. And once you feel that stability, just allow your straight leg to just draw down. Meanwhile, you're hugging your left leg in quite a bit. Draw your straight leg down a little bit more, and you're showing a lot of action in your toes. And draw the leg down just a little bit more. Chances are you're starting to feel those hip flexors. I mean, a lot of people tell me they feel a little trembling going on, and if that's the case for you, you've probably gone way too far. So let's try that again. Lift your legs straight up. And at that point where you feel like you're really working it, that's you've gone too far, right? For this one, we're just trying to do a few repetitions where we take the foot down slightly and you pause there. Runners and people that, do a lot of walking, a lot of sitting, like those three groups really benefit from these actions to stabilize the pelvis. All for different reasons, actually, but the same issues tend to be prevalent in all three groups. Just draw your right foot down a little bit more, or keep it where it feels very stable and you're not like shaking. And last time, lift the leg up and slowly float it down, slowly, slowly, slowly. This time we won't hold it quite so long. And as you're ready, bend both knees and plant your feet on the floor. Lift your pelvis up. Take your pelvis off the block. Let the block be to your side and out of your way, and straighten your legs. And pause here. As you straighten your legs with your palms open, just pause. Maybe you can rock to one side and the other in the pelvic area. And once you do, just find that middle point for you where you feel very stable. Please stay in Shavasana for as long as you wish, or if you need to get on to your daily activities, please do. To the knowledge of our own self that yoga practice always brings, we bow. Namaste. Thank you so very much.